Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lily Hazekovic and I'm the head of product marketing here at CharityEngine. We're going to give everybody just a couple minutes to trickle in. As you're joining us, feel free to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. We always love to hear where people are at throughout the country. I'm very excited about today's session. We're going to be talking about how nonprofit teams like yours clean, organize, manage donor data for ultimately better fundraising results. And so we have a very interesting speaker today, Stephanie Willis. She is a data expert. She has over 15 years of experience in this space, whether it's prospect research, data analytics, fundraising operations. She also leads research and analytics strategy at Creative Fundraising Advisors. But most notably, she actually recently launched a new book on exactly this topic. Her new book is called The Art and Science Approach to Fundraising Data and Research. We're going to link to that here in a moment in case anybody's interested in checking it out. And before I pass it over to Stephanie for today's session and workshop, I did want to just take 1 minute to briefly introduce CharityEngine for anybody who may not be familiar with us. We are a unified fundraising platform in CRM, and we like to stress the unified aspect. Today, Stephanie is going to be talking about data, importance of data cleanliness. And for CharityEngine, this is something that's been really at our core and center from the get-go. All of the various fundraising tools, or as we like to call them, modules, are native to our platform. So whether you are doing events, managing major gifts, running a sustainer or monthly giving program, doing email, direct mail, peer-to-peer, advocacy, actions, all of that functionality is native and built into our platform, which ultimately leads to your data being centralized and in one place. Gives you a ability to have clean data you can trust, data you can easily report on. And some of the ways that some of the things that we're going to be covering today is just how important that is for your fundraising. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie. Stephanie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And hello, it seems like from all across the country. So I'm honored to be here and I love talking about this stuff. So let's go ahead and jump in. You already heard a background. I'm not going to go into more details. Yes, I did just have a book come out that the links are going to be dropped in there, but please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think my intro is more than generous and I just want to get to the meat of the presentation, but please feel free to connect with me and follow up questions, etc. So today we're going to be talking, when I think about these webinars, I want to leave everybody with at least one new tip or a strategy that maybe you haven't considered. I'm also understanding that you're probably in multiple different shops, in sectors, etc. And so while not everything is going to be applicable, I really want to talk about some best practices, but also encourage you to think about, just because I say they're best practices doesn't mean your organization or the staff is ready for them. And so again, I'm going to throw a lot at you. Happy to clarify anything, but my goal is for everybody to learn at least one thing new. So in our time, I'm going to be introducing a case study. So a real life example of a situation where I came in and helped an organization clean up data, what it did for them. But more importantly, I'm going to transition to translate it to your organization. So ways to identify messy data, how and when should you even clean it up? What processes and procedures should you have so that it doesn't get messy? And then leaving you with how to leverage it. Where do you go? Do you even invest in these things? So again, the goal is to learn one thing new. And at the end, there'll be time for questions. So feel free to put them in chat and I'm going to keep rolling. So you're welcome to comment on this or just kind of think to yourself, but these are really the questions that I like to introduce when I'm talking to organizations to clients. And so in 3 words or less, how would you describe your organization's data? I usually get, people don't come to webinars about fixing messy data if they don't have some kind of problem, but usually when I ask people, they'll say it's messy, it's clean, it's unorganized, or it's okay, but it could be better. And so think about these questions on the screen. How would you describe it? Can you trust it? Can you report on it? If the answer is no, maybe some red flags. How would you rate the quality of your data? Maybe everything is sound, but system fields don't make sense, or there's a lot of institutional knowledge. Is the quality of your data actionable? And then the last thing is really key is, does everyone feel comfortable in your database? There is a whole separate part of my work in consulting where I actually go in and say, are you in the right system? Or not even are you in the right system? Are you maximizing the use of your system? So be thinking about that. These questions are reflection as you kind of orient, well, we really need to understand when we say our data is messy or we need to fix it. What do we mean? And I'm going to unpack that a little bit. There is also a data self-assessment. If you want more questions to understand, do we have red flags? The link is there, and I believe there's tons of resources out there, but things to be thinking about are things like integration, shadow databases. So how I think that databases, I know, a fundraising CRM should be your primary source of truth. Any data that's not in your primary source of truth leaves you at risk for integrity, misinformation. And so that's a shadow database, is when you have spreadsheets or files that are not in your primary source of truth. And then some of the other questions, again, go into training, or is everyone on your team knowledgeable about how you're tracking, and then regularly auditing your database. So you're welcome to take that, et cetera, but there's also some resources that you're going to see, and again, keeping in mind. So I am not going to share specific client information, but I will give a broad kind of snapshot. And so this theater organization celebrated their 40th anniversary in 2025. So it's a great theater, and their real why they came to need some help is they were migrating from Razor's Edge to Tessitura, and their literal statement was, we can't trust their data. Now that to me can mean so many different things. And so this is kind of painting the scene of, how do I diagnose what's wrong? What do you do? Where do you focus time? So in this particular case, I always like to have a discovery meeting. And so if you're in your organization, you maybe think about, how do you have a discovery with the people who work there, et cetera. So when I had this discovery meeting, there were 3 main buckets that I noticed. The first is it's under the bucket of data integrity. So team members couldn't accurately pull lists from reporting for their database. Every report was manual. So celebrating 40 years, no understanding of how much success has been over those 40 years, legacy donors, et cetera. There's a lot of institutional knowledge. So that's red flag number 1, is not being able to actually do anything with the data itself. Number 2 was, again, a migration to another system. Whenever you change systems, it opens up the data of, you have to understand, well, what data fits from here into there? How do we code it, et cetera? And so they knew they had a turnaround to do that, but they just lacked time and expertise to be able to understand, well, how do we do it? How do we prep for it before we get into a new system? And then the third might not have been apparent to them regarding that data was preventing it, but what I found is the theater had a very loyal base of donors who gave and not always asked, but they had never been asked to increase their gift, but also there was not a big pipeline. And that's a really common trend that I'm seeing in fundraising too. That's always the thing of, when older generations go and the transfer of wealth, and younger generations, are they going to be as philanthropic? But so I always have my eye on, does the data support who our next gifts are going to come from? Who are our next donors? And so these were the 3 areas that I identified were areas of, let's tighten up and really get you prepared. So my top recommendations, what did I do with that information? You'll see these 3 things that were key for me to focus on. So I have a product called a data audit, where I come into an organization, I get credentials, and I review all the constituent information. So I look at system usage, I look at the actual records themselves. Do you have 13,000 duplicates? How are system fields going? And so I recommend to them, let me peek behind the scenes with my knowledge of systems. And I'm skilled or / certified in most all of the products on the market. And so I look for consistent things of either data integrity or system usage. More important to me, you can have the most beautiful system, but it's so important to understand how the team is using it. So with every client engagement I have staff interviews. I talk to anybody who has a login, who has a role that is related to fundraising data. And I like to have a one-on-one conversation to provide a safe space of what obstacles do you have of using it. And so they, in interviews, I would confirm, yes, I can't trust this. I want to trust it. And so I usually start those conversations with, if you had your dream system, what would it be? And how is that different from what you have now? And so as you're thinking about, you came to this webinar for a reason, how can you get more team buy-in to actually tackle something? And we'll talk about that later. But the third recommendation that I think sometimes gets overlooked is you can investigate and you can clean data, but where is that bad data coming from? And so processes and procedures are really important. I'll share my favorite ones later in the presentation, but there were no processes and procedures. And honestly, that is so common. If you're like, Stephanie, I don't have them, that's so common, I promise you. And yet it's part of the ability to keep things clean and initiative is I wanted to leave them ready to go and knowing that in 5 years, they wouldn't have to contact me, et cetera. So I mentioned the data audit. This is a little bit behind the scenes of how I structure it. And so I'm going to talk through again how this translates to you or how you can apply this. But when I think of we need to fix our data, there could be 50,000, a million records in your system. You can't get to everybody. And so I like to think of data cleanup, and especially in the audit, in these buckets, phases, priorities. And so you'll see high, medium, low priority. I really like to set priority based on usually giving tiers. So I'll ask the organization, what is that gift amount that you really pay attention to? Is it $1,000, $10,000, $25,000? I want to put high priority on those people because those are the people that we need to, they're not going to care if we're cleaning up their data. In fact, we're never going to tell them. We need to make sure that we're keeping up fundraising operations, and we need to get to those records first. So medium priority are those individuals who or organizations who, yes, they give, but they're not as frequent and the urgency isn't there. And then low is you should not clean your entire database. You can have, again, the cleanest database, but if you don't use it, if it's just names, there's really no point. But I like to talk the client through identifying those while I have my high priority medium. I like to confirm with the organization, and your priorities might be different. But it's also a phased approach because when I look at cleaning up data, I look at the biggest obstacles that would ruin donor relationships. I am such a big, in fact, in my book, I talk a lot about replacing the word fundraising with philanthropy because fundraising is just raising funds. Philanthropy is more. It is about building relationships. Every single record in a database is a story, is more than just a data point. And so when I look at data, I look for any obstacles that would ruin a relationship with that person, the organization, because at some point they trusted you with their information. We need to be really good stewards about this. So you will generally find a data audit. I will look for the areas that, again, could threaten relationships. Deceased individuals, if you take nothing away from this webinar, please focus on making sure that you have some kind of deceased finder. I have tools if you're like, I don't know where to start, but there is nothing worse. And I've been on the end too of having somebody receive something on behalf of their deceased relative. It's just, it would give me no motivation to give. And so that is really what I look at first is we need to. And in this case study, the organization had never run it. And there was 800 people who ended up deceased. Not uncommon, not their fault. It's just, it needed to be addressed. And that was number one priority for me is all deceased individuals, whether they had given or not. If they were in the database, deceased was that. And then addresses and contact information. I mean, to me, in theory, if you can't get a hold of somebody, you can't get a gift. And the addresses in particular, addresses really mask a lot of duplication problems. So even if you pull a mailing list and you have Excel do, highlight duplicates, it's still going to miss things like street spelled out STREET or ST or ST period. And duplicate checkers and all of that it can be really tough. And so I really look for, again, it kind of bubbles in between duplicates here and duplicates in medium priority, depending on how many there are, who they are, etc. But you don't want somebody to suddenly use a different email, come into your system, and you send them something, welcome to us, and they're like, we've been giving to you forever. So again, that's a little bit how I kind of prioritize it. And then I look at really what the fundraising results or goals or strategies are and marry that together. So for instance, if your organization prides itself on sending stewardship birthday cards, let's prioritize that. And so I really think, again, as you're thinking about, and you will hear my dog make an appearance if you have not already, but you really have to think about, okay, of these, and these are on the screen, key data points. I'll talk about it in a different screen too, but what are the key data points that we need to make sure that fundraising is going smoothly? So the project summary. So again, I did the audit, the interviews, there was some data cleanup, but when you come to a webinar and you think, yes, I want to clean it, I always think, what is the ROI? What will this help accomplish? Because I'm going to be honest, and if you're a leader on this call, pay attention. It is really hard to prioritize data cleanup. It's something that we'll get to. We hope to get to on a rainy day. There's never enough time, never enough energy. And so I always look for, by doing this work, what will it help accomplish? So in this case study, all deceased individuals were identified and marked. Amazing, great. We may not catch them all, but at least they were. The next one was interesting, and something I want to plant in your head too is the organization really prided itself on communications in a very certain way, a formal way. And so they wanted street spelled out. I have done so much research about post office rules and coding, et cetera. They wanted to do something that wasn't in that because they had a standard. And so we standardized their addresses based on that because they prided themselves on their donor communication. We put a new constituent code hierarchy system. One of their goals was, we want to be able to segment, but we can't. And so this illuminated the ability of, let's code them. And so a tag or something like that to be able to segment, pull list effectively. The fourth bullet point was probably the biggest win. Where they couldn't pull accurate reports is because over 40 years, gifts were coded all different ways. And so they couldn't accurately pull fundraising results because they had to manually look at gifts and say, nope, that's there. And so I helped them recode 100,000 gift records so that they can pull it. And their time went from hours to minutes. And that was the biggest success. But then things, again, not related to the data, they had over 200 new prospects for further cultivation. And so be thinking about that too, because if you are in a position where you have to look for the next donor, who's your pipeline, if they're locked behind bad data, you can never get to them. And so that is a justification for maybe we should clean up to see, oh, we have data points now that can help us understand. We make our database work smarter for us, but they can't unless it's unlocked from data problems. And then the last one was really cool. By me doing the work and just the work in general, it illuminated that they needed more hands on deck, and they had enough support just by 5 new positions, and they have a new database administrator. I would love to say that every client, every organization is this was a huge win, but wins look different. And so all of this helped accomplish for them being able to enter their next decades of fundraising more successful, set up, and just in general in a better place. Now, how does this translate to your organization? Again, I threw a lot of topics. Let's break it down a little bit. So you saw the slide and I alluded to seeing it again. So identifying messy data. When I hear messy data, I think of these 3 buckets. So there's key data points. So messy data could be under names, addresses, contact information, biographical information. That's messy data in the sense of we have key information that is not up to par, needs cleaning, inaccurate, etc. Then sometimes the question is we have messy data, but it's because of database pain points. We have hundreds of duplicates. Custom fields, we have thousands. I think the most custom fields I've seen in organization was 3,000. And I said, how on earth do you know which custom field to pick if there's so many? Now, that's a whole rabbit hole of should we clean them or not that, I won't touch, but gifts, that in the case study, gifts was a pain point because they weren't coded accurately. Again, there was nothing wrong with the gift itself. It's just lined up with the others. You couldn't accurately pull results. And so relationships, that's a database pain point, and notes and actions. But then the third bucket of messy data is actually, again, where the pain points came from, is reporting, appeals, and solicit codes. So reporting, messy data, again, if things are coded different or you can't pull a report because of XYZ, that's your mess. That's where you need to focus. What is inaccurate? What do you need to fix so that you're able to do that? If you don't have accurate tracking of appeals, and so appeals in the sense of what, if we send something out, are we consistently understanding how to measure the impact of it, the ROI? And then solicit codes is also something in the maintenance and stewardship of messy, of a, do you understand and have logged your donor preferences, of a, we want to hear from you, we don't want to hear from you. So again, as you think about why you came to this session, what bucket do you fit in? Because when you tackle something like this matters to be able, these are much different topics because it can be straightforward of cleaning addresses, but then coming to duplicates of, we have to make sure that we have the right person to compare to, flash to reporting, again, different entry points to messy data. So how to build a data cleanup plan. You may be thinking, great, Stephanie, I'm sold, I'm here. I really do want you to think, is it worth it? Because there have been times where I have coached organizations to say, I don't think you're ready for data cleanup. And here are some of the reasons and rationale that I kind of want you all to think about as well. So first is probably the most important. Does your organization have a culture that's aligned with data collection, integrity, and usage? So what if you are at an organization and the vice president doesn't use the system, keeps all of the information in their head? They don't support it. That's going to be really hard to get buy-in to do this and to keep it clean in the first place. So that culture needs to be aligned of, does everybody understand? And that leads into the buy-in. It needs a whole team approach. And also I've seen initiatives where I think in my younger years, I would tackle and say, well, this has to be it because I'm the expert, I'm the database administrator, and that's not really how to get traction and change management. You need buy-in. And so in my book, I also talk about a situation where I wanted to make database improvements based on feedback from team members. I included those team members in it. So that it's not Stephanie wants to clean up the system. It is a unified, we need to clean up the system, because the database is everybody's. It is the organization's. It's not just the administrator. It's a fundraisers. It's the marketing person. Everybody collectively does it. And so can you get buy-in? Are there other people who will support it so that's not just your initiative, it's a team approach? The benefit you'll see, I highlighted some from the case study. Are there direct benefits that you will see by doing this? Chances are yes, because again, there's something going on, but is there a direct benefit that will come if you invest in this? The last two are really, a little bit more challenging, but do you have the expertise and knowledge? And I would also throw in, based on my 5 years in consulting, the time. The case study that I mentioned, they had the expertise. They could have gotten the knowledge. They had no time to clean the data. I will also be the first to admit, when I was a database administrator and a team of one, I hired a consultant because, yes, I had the expertise and knowledge. I didn't have the time. And so as you think about, maybe you do have the time. Do you have the expertise? Do you know exactly how you will? Maybe it includes studying. Maybe it includes talking to your rep about how you can get in there and clean the data and what tools the system provides. And then the last one, again, I've mentioned it a couple times, but if you clean it, do you have a sound infrastructure? What I mean by that is, if you clean it, are there processes and procedures or things in place that will keep you from having to clean up a massive data cleanup in 5 years, in 10 years? And if it's not, if your organization doesn't align on making sure that it stays clean, then you have to investigate, again, the ROI behind it. Now I want to talk about, again, I mentioned some of my favorite processes and procedures. So I have a brain that thinks in processes and procedures. I'm not sure. I know that this isn't where everybody shines, but I love it. And so my favorite ones that if you don't have to consider are, first, constituent code definitions. So unpacking that a little bit more, every system really has some ability to track the relationship that a constituent, so a constituent is either an individual, an organization. There is a component where basically a constituent code, a tag or whatever, should define the relationship that that individual or organization has with you. So for instance, if I were to pop into your system, or a new staff member to come into your system and they see your constituent code or your tag, does it make sense? So I'll give a, for instance, prospect. If you don't have a definition of what prospect means in your land, it could be confusing. Is that a prospect now? Is that a prospect later? Is it always a prospect? And so having definitions of that tag and that relationship go a long way. I get the question a lot, how many constituent codes should we have? I personally had as many that made sense, that they're really good real estate to give a snapshot of how this person or organization is connected to you. So be thinking about things like, do you have a constituent code that is donor and non-donor? Or do you have prospect 2026? Things that help define, to understand the relationship and what that means, and don't just assume that everybody understands it. Then data entry procedures. This is probably so hard because it's so hard to take the time to actually do it. But I was a shop of one and work had to stop when I was gone. But I wrote up a procedure about how to keep the lights on. And also not only if I was gone, but what are those things that, again, help us keep it clean? So data entry procedures could be, we document addresses always like this, so that there can be something that somebody has. I'll time out and say something also with procedures. You may, if you're a database administrator, and I was, you may have a training and think, great, I trained everybody, they're good. Where procedures of any kind, especially data entry, is if somebody doesn't do it on a regular basis, there is an obstacle to remembering how, because people who are not doing this all the time, even me, if I come back to something after a while, I need to be reminded. So having the documented procedures, screenshots, etc., of this is exactly how we enter it. This is maybe why we enter it, the meaning behind it. So these, to me, are processes and procedures, but they're more robust. They're a screenshot of click here, do that. Again, time consuming, but also it's protecting your organization and your legacy of standardization. We do that. And just also, if God forbid something happens to the person who knows this, the organization isn't suffering. There was, again, I talk about it in my book, there was a situation where I ended up being a database administrator as a consultant for a client, because they lost the only person that had knowledge to the system. Now, I don't think a consultant should ever be a database administrator. However, my job number one was to make sure I documented everything I did so that I could ensure that the next person had something and they did not have to go figure it out. So it's related to gift entry as well. I will say also, if you're kind of unfamiliar with gift entry, you don't do that, etc., the fundraising fundraising gift entry can be so different than what finance looks at. I get so many times where there's finance reconciliation and fundraisers are looking at finance team like, why are you coding it like that? And vice versa. And so having gift entry procedures, gift entry is a pretty tough gig. There's a lot of things that you may not know. And having a how we enter it, why we enter it, how we reconcile with finance, that is really important for organizations because audits come up every year. And so you really want to make sure to have a smooth process, and having that gift entry is going to be really key. This one is documented institutional knowledge. It is from real life experience at almost every place I've been. There is usually somebody who has been at the organization a long time, and all of that knowledge is in here. Now, it could be they didn't have time to put it in. They don't know how to put it in. They don't think to put it in. I will, when I'm in those situations, or if I'm with a client in that situation, I will offer, let me sit with you in a room, spew all of the institutional knowledge, let me capture it and figure out. I want to remove any obstacles of getting that information, because those individuals have some of the best key points to keep the relationship going with the person. And so also institutional knowledge of, why do we code things the way that we do? Why did we make a switch? There's usually in every data audit, I will give a database snapshot. So an organization first got this system, it changed to here, that went wrong. And that institutional knowledge kind of helps. Again, you want to think about, you're not going to have your system forever, but the organization is going to have that data. And so documenting institutional knowledge is really key before people leave and all of that goes. I actually give a story that I liken it to going to a coffee shop. And imagine that you go to a coffee shop and you're known, and at some point your drink is handed to you because you always order that and they know your name, etc. And then one day you go in the coffee shop and there's brand new owners who don't care, who get your drink wrong, etc. That's institutional knowledge. If the owners who knew you documented that and knew preferences, etc., and imagine the new owners coming in and already knowing you because institutional knowledge, what a blessing. And so I think some of those customer service tips really come into play. And that's really the case for institutional knowledge. If we want to protect the relationships that somebody has with the organization, we've got to document it. Accurate position descriptions. So this is not necessarily a process and procedure, but maybe you wouldn't be shocked. There are so many times when I will look at a job description for somebody who I'm working with, and it's maybe half accurate. And they're like, I don't do this. Or, yes, I'm supposed to do all this, but I have no time. This is one, if you're thinking, I do so many things that I don't feel like are written out, or maybe in the all duties as assigned, really take a look and also see, should things be in there? Now, I know that you can't always have control over that, and there's so much red tape and organization thing, but hopefully you can, and advocate for yourself and think, is my work accurately reflected in there? I've been in jobs where it's not, and I've pushed for it. Sometimes it's been successful, sometimes it's not. But in the whole grand scheme of clean data and processes and procedures, you need to be able to document who is doing things. And if work isn't getting done in position description, get it out of there. Maybe it's a justification that you're doing things that are out of your skill set. Maybe you need to advocate that somebody else is hired. Lots of different cases. And then lastly, database training guides. I mean, that seems pretty obvious. And the other thing also that I'd like to point out is you can get training guides. I mean, I'm sure that you're in a system, and even, it's training guides are usually provided, but I like to coach organizations to think, do you need to add anything to the training guide? So if we're handed a training guide for that, and there's a nuance of, well, we add it like this, or we use the system. I'm telling you, I've seen organizations who have the exact same system, who are competitors, so to speak. They're in the same sector, around the same size, and they use the system two different ways. Now, if they have the same training guide, but they use it in different ways, that's going to leave you up for, especially if people come from organization to organization, it's really important for everyone to understand this is how we use the system. And the training guides are also role specific. If I hand a 50-page document of a training guide and say, go fundraise or learn, that might not even be their learning style. So when I say database training guides, it's not just written. Could it be a video? Could it be a recording? Could it be always a face-to-face conversation? And so again, lot here, a lot of processes and procedures, but those are some of my favorites because again, the whole goal of this is how do we not get into this situation again? Okay. So developing a data cleaning plan. So again, I'm going to go back to get your entire team involved. So I've mentioned several times, a database isn't just owned by a database administrator. And in fact, there are some clients who I have who don't have a database administrator. I've seen the COO, I've seen the chief financial officer, I've seen a fundraiser, I've seen a lot of different people have to wear the hat of database administrator. Bless your heart if you are that person who you're like, preach, Stephanie, I'm not a database administrator, and suddenly I am. I see it. And so what I coined when I was a database administrator, because I didn't want it just to be Stephanie's nagging us, Stephanie wants us to keep it clean, I created what's called data champion roles. So what do I mean by that? Things like the executive assistant to the vice president was struggling with, I don't have accurate board of directors contact information. I said, you know what? You're in records all the time. Could you help me keep those clean? Could you let me know of problems with it? Suddenly it became you mean my problem's going to be fixed? I don't have to go through those things. I just have to tell you what's wrong. Then you create more accountability so that, again, think of every position who touches it. You have to make a case for why it impacts their job. I used to really go in and say, tell me how I can make your job easier. That was what my selling point. And I honestly meant it, because if I could improve other people on the team's jobs, then my life in theory would be easier because I wouldn't have problems. I wouldn't be struggles. And so for whatever you can, think about how to get your team. How do you get that buy-in? I don't know why these are all number ones, but I guess they're all equally important. But number two, I use the word evergreen a lot, and I alluded to it. So if you're not familiar with what I mean by keeping your database as evergreen as possible, a database should never just be somebody's playground. So meaning a leader comes to you and says, I want a dashboard. Okay, great. But before I do things in the system, I like to think, is this just to make the individual's life easier? Are we going to be able to use it? Will it be usable for others? Will it go into the future? And then another example too that I mentioned is the constituent code of prospect. Prospect now, prospect later. It's having some clues, and evergreen means that you can come in and it's fresh for years to come. So a couple other examples. If you're writing a note or an action or doing anything in the system, say we'll take a note, for example, Stephanie went and visited XYZ donor. 5 years from now, will people know who Stephanie is? Do they have to go and look up? And so evergreen is the senior manager of blah went into this. So thinking about, if I were to read this, not with the knowledge I have, or if 10 years from now, can the user understand who the person was? Can they act on the information? And having a roadmap, again, for staff members always. And so be thinking about how to use dates. Could you use Prospect 2026? Could you have an annual reminder where you go in and review all your systems? There's a lot of times where campaigns or funds, appeals, gift tracking codes will be a certain year, and that's great. Or do you keep it over ending so that every year you don't have to change it, but you can filter on date? And so again, if you're thinking about, yes, I need to make it evergreen and I don't think about it, maybe ask a user who's not in the system to go in and say, I don't understand that. That's a learning gap. Acronyms, things like that, or again, that institutional knowledge. Be thinking about, again, what are barriers to somebody coming in and learning your system? The cleanup plan then too, okay, getting everybody involved, making the system, if you're going to do it, how will it last? Is it an initiative now or later? And if it's a now, do you need to get the information out when it's not usable anymore? I don't like cluttered databases. I think they should be lean, etc. And that's where data cleaning priorities go. I talked about the buckets of key data points, etc. And I mentioned, custom fields, and this is where I want to circle back to it. What data would be nice to have cleaned, needs to be cleaned, and what shouldn't be cleaned? Custom fields. Are they hurting anything? Maybe, maybe not. Would it be nice to have them cleaned? Yes. 3,000, they need to be cleaned if we are using custom fields and there are barriers to understanding what we pick, what they're defined, etc. What shouldn't be cleaned? Custom fields literally do not hurt anything in donor land, except if you get it wrong, of course, or it's outdated information, not used right. But you need to think about, again, where do we fit? What would be really great to have clean? Stephanie, I'd love to standardize addresses, but if nothing is wrong, nothing is impacting your fundraising results by having something that is messy, I wouldn't invest time in it. And again, what shouldn't be cleaned? I would not worry about what drives me crazy when I come into a database is just a name. I don't know why there's just a name. I would never go in and clean them. Otherwise, maybe I would just purge them, but really be thinking about what are your priorities? What is the biggest impact if you clean that can get you to your goal? Is it to make more money? Is it to find more prospects? Is it so that more people understand how to use it? Cleaning priorities are super key. Return on investment. So again, you can be sitting in this presentation thinking, yes, Stephanie, I'm in, but not everybody is going to be there too. And so you need to start thinking about, sometimes this is advocacy. Sometimes this is about what is in it for everybody else when they don't understand how data directly impacts fundraising. So here are some tips. One, the legacy of your organization. Again, I gave that coffee shop analogy. If your organization prides itself on relationships, et cetera, and it slacks off in data entry, et cetera, 5 years from now, you don't want to snafu with your loyal donor. Another real life book example, I came to a position and inherited a system that had been through three database conversions, so 3 systems in 5 years. It was a mess. There had been a recent mailing before I started, and one of our $1 million level donors had different addresses in the system, a seasonal, a business, and a home. And he got 7 pieces of the same mailing because data management hygiene had slipped during that time. Legacy of your organization, he pulled his gift. He said, I can't trust you to send me an accurate mailing at the address I want. Why am I giving you that? Now, that is a real huge case, but it does happen. And so again, the cleaner your data, the more you can protect. That's what I mean by the legacy of your organization and going into sustaining donor relationships. You do not want to piss off donors. I don't want to be, if I give somebody my money, I want to trust that they're going to accurately interact with me. It's been so interesting because I went through my second, I got remarried and switched my name, which feels crazy considering, yes, I never thought it would be, but it's interesting that I have been Stephanie Willis for a couple years now, and I still will get mail from organizations with my last name. And I do not give to them because if they can't bother in 2 years to know that I have a different last name, I do not have a relationship with them. Now that takes time on an organization to really think about that. How do you maintain it? But again, donor relationships, there is in a good way, it's a very competitive landscape. Fundraising is competitive. There are so many organizations out there. And unfortunately, whether you like it or not, you compete with the same donors. Throwing my prospect research hat on, when I conduct research on an individual and of wealth especially, there's probably 8 to 12 other organizations who are researching that same one. So make sure that, again, data accuracy is there, because now this is not competitive, great fundraising in general, but again, you want to make sure that you treat your donors with respect. Switching gears a little bit, again, the return on investment is if you can't pull information from your system accurately with minimal manual effort, something is going wrong. You pay thousands of dollars for systems, and you really want to make sure that it is tip-top and that you don't have manual time that's just going down the drain because you can't accurately report on them. There is one easy way to get the attention of leaders, et cetera, and board members in particular, they want stats, they want reports, they want them pretty, they want graphs, they want to see, get to the point. They don't want, long things of data. If you can't do that and suddenly on a notice, you have to provide that and you can't, that could be your justification of, I'd love to get you that information. I can't, I'm constrained by time, manual effort. There becomes your case on return on investment of really putting in. And it only takes kind of that philosophy of, this is impacting something we want to do. Let's get on it. And then I illuminated this in the case study as well. New promising prospects. Again, it's really tough. And there's so many times that bad data can lock key information about a constituent to see, is that relationship there? So new promising prospects can really happen if you have the ability to go mine in your database for them. Okay. I did link a couple resources in here because I have fought my own battles about getting leadership to invest in data cleanup. And so there's a couple articles, another case study that I have, and an article. There's another one coming out pretty soon, but I understand, it's an uphill battle. In my book, I actually talk about advocacy because sometimes you can have the best clean case if we need to do this and it goes nowhere. And so I get it. And so there's a couple articles for you. And I believe I will turn it over for this, or should I not go there yet?
That's fine. I'll take it there in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I think we also have some links that folks can click to so they can get to these case studies. I'm going to make sure our producer shares them here in a moment. But Stephanie, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot. I think your last bit here, when you were talking about risk of offending donors, is something that really resonated with me because we hear this often and see this often. And one of the examples that we like to give is you have a major donor who's given, $10,000, $20,000 to your organization. And let's say their friend is your P2P fundraiser. They contribute to that friend's P2P page. Suddenly they're coming in, maybe you're using a different P2P tool. Suddenly they're coming in as, just a basic donor who's contributed $20 to a P2P campaign because your tools are not integrated, because your data is not integrated, talking to each other. You might be emailing them saying, thank you for your $20 gift. Would you be interested in giving us, a $20 monthly gift? Meanwhile, They're your major donor.
Yeah, right.
We've seen that happen. And so I think both from a technology perspective and also just simple day-to-day data governance best practices, I think both of those ends have to be thought about as we think about, healthy, clean data.
Yeah.
I am going to go ahead and go to questions. I know we have several questions that came in, but I did want to share, every time we do these workshops, we would like to do these type of events and webinars where we're allowing the audience to learn something new, learn something valuable that they can take to their day-to-day right away. We also like to pair it with a little giveaway. And so this is completely obligation-free. You do not need to be looking for a fundraising CRM. You do not need to be in the market for a fundraising CRM. It's just something that we like to provide to our webinar attendees. We have only 5 slots because we're using kind of our internal resources for this. We're essentially offering a 15 to 20 minute call for anybody who might be interested in a free fundraising data health check. And what this is you basically get a call with one of our experts and they'll go through with you a data health scorecard, and you'll come out of this with your data health score. They're also going to look at some of your automations that you may be using to maintain your data. And essentially, in addition to that score and asking you through, kind of taking you through a set of questions and looking at, your practices today, you're going to walk away with some easy, quick wins that you can implement right away and at least get your wheels turning as far as what you can do moving forward. So it's meant to be something valuable, something you can use out of the gate. If that's of interest, we do have 5 slots. You can scan this QR code. It will take you to a landing page where you can register. Let's go to questions. I saw some good ones pop in. We have one from Peter. Peter is in a situation, he says he inherited Network for Good donor system, which is about 5,000 records that may be inaccurate. And so there's also no staff currently knows the system. He's asking, how can I quickly assess whether to keep it or migrate, and what key indicators should guide that decision?
Sure. No, that's a great question, and one I encounter regularly. And so I would pose back, what are your non-negotiables for a system? And so you mentioned you inherited it, inaccurate, no one knows it. So your non-negotiable in every system is, well, your staff should know it. I mean, that's number one. And so whether to keep, I'm not sure if you mean by I do. Keep it or migrate from it. I would look at, can you go back to your rep, or can you talk to or look at training guides to see, is there potential here? Now, I'm not going to comment on specific. I tend to be database agnostic. You can give me any system. I can figure out how to make it use, but I will say that there are just sometimes right or wrong fits, and it's not for me to know, but think about your non-negotiables. And does that system offer that non-negotiable? So for instance, no one knows this system, whether you migrate or not. If you look in the information, can people not understand what it is? Is it a system barrier or is it a data barrier? And so again, if you migrate it, are there tools and solutions that can help? Are there training guides available so that they can get up to speed? Is there a barrier in, we're never going to learn the system, or our staff just does not have the skills and expertise to be in it? Then you might need to migrate. Or can you explore all of the tools and options and solutions in what you have? Because the other thing that to keep in mind, whether you have a system that you're evaluating or not, the question is about, do I migrate or not? Think migrating a database leaves every time an organization up for risk, because, as somebody who inherited a system that had been through 3 and 5 years, each time you do that, databases are going to have different codes and tables, et cetera. And so I like to tell an organization, if you just cannot see yourself in this product or growing into it, or let's have a 6-month goal of making it work in our system. Okay. So if we set a 6 months of, we're going to tackle this, we're going to train the staff, et cetera, and that's still not working, then you might need to look into solutions. The other thing that I'm going to give you a piece of advice on is also, you can always vet other database companies. I mean, it's always good to understand what is on the market. Database companies are changing. They're becoming nimble. There's more available on the market, and it never hurts to see what is out there, but you have to have the align on, well, what is it that we're looking for? Is our system unusable? What made it unusable? Staff barriers, people, time, all of that. Is it the data? Is it the system? And so I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but again, key indicators should be, can it be rectified? Because a migration takes a long time, the skill set, the jeopardy of the integrity, a lot to consider. And so off the top of my head, those are kind of my tips, and you're welcome to connect with me if you're like, Stephanie, you dodged the question, but it's a large one. And I think the last thing I'll look at you too is how many usable records, if they're inaccurate, what is inaccurate about it? What makes you not trust it? And then how do you go back to that kind of, is it key data points? Is it reporting? Think about why it may be inaccurate. How do you fact find if it is or isn't before you make that decision? Look at other systems. If you're like, gosh, this gives us so much more, you don't have to necessarily go with it. Sometimes you're locked into a contract for X amount of time. Maybe in 2-3 years, you come back and you develop that relationship and take your time. And again, best of luck. And hopefully that answered a little bit of your question.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Here's another one. And this one goes back to what you were talking about earlier about the importance of buy-in. And I think you gave some examples in the ways in which you were able to basically pull people into meetings so that it wasn't just, Stephanie cares about clean data. This question, so this is from Julie. She's saying, if data cleanliness isn't part of the culture yet, how do we start building that mindset and getting team buy-in? Any ideas?
Yeah, I would, if any time something goes wrong or there's a problem or a pain point or a complaint, I would log that. And I would use those opportunities to make a case. So for instance, the donor who pulled his gift because of a mailer because it was inaccurate. That is a best case of, we don't want that to happen again. We need to rectify it. The problem is it shouldn't take that to spark it. And so I'd encourage you to think about the change management piece of this, because, you can make a case of you're going to find new prospects, etc. There will be obstacles for people, regardless of what system you have, what your data looks like, because not everybody feels comfortable with it. And so I find a tip that honestly has set me up very well as a consultant. And there's a tip in my book, and it's under the customer service, is listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen more. And so getting buy-in is sometimes giving a space to say, help me understand, tell me about your job, remove data, remove database from it. Sometimes I just say, tell me about your job. Tell me what you hope to accomplish. Again, I have that. If you had a perfect system, what would it do? Then you lead back when you get traction, and it's less about what you're actually trying to push. And it's more it's just like what we're trying to do in fundraising. It's about building relationships. And so I think about kind of those things of, do you have that good rapport with team members? Do you not? Or does somebody else have a good rapport where they can talk about it? And so the more kind of dominoes that fall are there. And then I'm going to leave you with one other thing to think about too, is there are times where it's not going to happen either. I left a position because I had initiatives and ideas and the organization wasn't ready for it. And it was not up to me. I actually had a call with 2 people after a webinar about this. And they said, Stephanie, it's just, we can't get traction. We can't get buy-in. We're doing all these things on the webinar. And I told them, then you have to manage your own internal expectations. If you are doing everything you can to build relationships, you can't change people. And so I'm not suggesting hop out of your job and leave. Maybe you have to accept that these things are not in my control. I'm going to control my universe in my way, but know that maybe it's above me that I can't get traction on this. So hang in, but really do start and have the approach of remove data and database from the conversation and connect as a human. Maybe you'll learn something about, I'm terrified to go in the database because I hear this all the time. I'm scared to ruin something, break something, delete something. I hear all of the obstacles of doing it, but at the end of the day, I also think there's a fear of unknown. People don't want to look dumb. And so when you have a database call, they're like, ooh, I don't know anything about databases. I'm going to look dumb. I should know this. No. Remove that. Provide a safe space of, let's not talk about that specific. Let me help understand your obstacles. Is it a different kind of training? Is it knowledge? Maybe they don't have fundraising knowledge. So I feel pretty passionate. I'm all riled up, but I applaud you for even trying and thinking, and best of luck in the efforts.
Looks like we have one more question. I know we're nearing our end, our time here.
Yeah.
My team is telling me we do have 1 spot left for this free reality check. So whoever gets it last, we have 1 minute left. Feel free to scan it. I'm glad that people are using this. This is our last question. It's for Shelley, from Shelley rather. What question? Actually, this is a question that I like a lot, is just from my vantage point. But the question is, what questions should we ask in the CRM selection process to ensure our data migration is in good hands?
Oh man, I could probably have a whole webinar on this topic. What I like to do in those questions is I like to have the person go off script. So there is generally a plan that goes on in demos. It is we want to show this, we want to feature it, we want to show that we're different from that. I like to pose back, you know what, here's my exact thing that I need help with. Maybe it's acknowledgement letters. Show me, go off script and show me how you would do acknowledgement letters in the system. And you're vetting their ability to know their product, because that also, you know, when you talk to companies, you want to be in the hands of a person who believes in their database. And I don't choose webinars there. And there's a reason I chose this one, because I firmly believe that this is where you get that. But that is what I do. I try to get them to go off script to show, are they knowledgeable about their product, or are they just trying to sell me? Are they trying to convert me? There is actually a two-way street there. Yes, they want your money, but at the end of the day, be weary of people who just want you so quick, because it's losing money on them. If they migrate somebody and they hop 2 years later, there is just as much to lose there. But be very careful. I'll leave you with this. I know we're at time. Be very careful of shiny toy syndrome. Yes, each system has a shiny toy, a new feature, something you haven't seen, because all databases are different. Stick to your non-negotiables. Come in before the demo and say, we need reporting, we need acknowledgement letters, we need this. Keep it small and don't sacrifice those just in case you see something like, we've got to have that. Really litmus test. Can we see ourselves in this product? Okay.
Stephanie, thank you so much. This was so useful. We got lots of good engagement. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope to have you again soon.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.